I only had a deeper relationship with Jesus or God after I was ready to stomp the Bible and toss it out the window. Then I could look at it without a Christian ego. Like a Christian ego.
Yeah.
Like, you came from heaven to earth to show the way. You know, like when you get rid of that and you can look at the Bible a little more objectively, you can appreciate it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
You know, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's some gold in here.
Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers. James and Justin back again with another reaction video, and we're going to look at another Aaron Abke video. This one is on liberating the Bible, and it's entitled The Danger of Biblical Inerrancy. So kind of like viewing the Bible as inerrant, which is weird because if you come maybe from like a Catholic or evangelical background, it's like the Bible's inerrant, right?
Yeah.
But this is just another way of looking at it. And if you are from any other walk of life out there, any other religious institution, and you hold your ancient scriptures in high regard, this is another way of looking at them where you're not getting rid of that. You're just analyzing it in a different way.
I get the sense that Aaron Abke really appreciates the Bible, values it, cherishes it. Don't you?
Yeah.
And I think he comes from even a Christian background.
Yeah.
Maybe this video is sort of for that, person who's in the walk on the road where they're kind of very skeptical. They're questioning some things. They have a lot of questions about their religion, but they don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They don't want to toss out everything they've learned from their faith and what they've learned in that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into it.
Whenever I hear a Christian say something like, "That's not biblical," I cringe a little bit inside, because stoning a woman on the street corner for prostitution is biblical. Dashing a baby's heads upon the rocks is biblical. I'm much more interested in what's Christ-like. See, if we call ourselves Christians, that means that we absolutely must hold ourselves to the standard of Christ above all else. We are not Davidians, we are not Paulians, we are not even Biblians. We are Christians, which means that Jesus is the standard. But when we make the Bible the standard, then words become idols and ideas become gods. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the all-pervasive belief in biblical inerrancy.
Why are there fish eating it?
Welcome back to Moving Backwards, Episode 3. Before we dive in today, I want to give you guys this quick disclaimer. I love this book. This book has meant more to me in my life than any other book by a mile. I simply am looking to liberate this book from the clutches of literalism, because this book has so much to teach us and so much to show us about ourselves and about God. And I want this book to shine as the crowning jewel of human literature that it is. So by saying that this book is not inerrant and infallible, I am in no way trying to diminish this book. In fact, quite the opposite. And if you're watching this video and you still hold the belief that this book is perfect and infallible and inerrant, I am in no way calling you stupid or ignorant or anything of that nature at all. I used to believe the very same thing myself. All I'm saying is that if you do hold this belief, then I believe that it's something you haven't investigated thoroughly enough. So I want to do that together today. The idol worship of the Bible is so deep and pervasive in the Christian faith that most Christians probably won't even click on this video just because of the title alone. But ironically, fundamentalism has destroyed the reputation of this book which they love so dearly, because of the framework they've tried to force upon it. There's probably no other book that non-religious people would want to read less today than this book right here. And that's a tragedy to me, because if people only had the right framework to read this book through, then this would be a book that everybody wants to read. For almost 2,000 years, the church has been forcing a narrative onto this book that the book does not even claim for itself. The Bible itself does not even claim to be inerrant. At the very best, the Bible claims to be inspired by God. all scripture is God-breathed. God-breathed meaning to breathe in, to inspire. But as we're going to discuss, there is a giant difference between saying something is inspired and saying it is dictated. To say that a book is inspired by God means that God is the catalyst for it. It means that God is the reason and the inspiration behind why the human authors were writing. But when you say that it's literally dictated by God, well, now you're asking me to read it like a flatline text, which means that Leviticus 3:16 is as equally valid as John 3:16. And I'm sorry, it just isn't. I can't tell you how many friends that I've had who left Christianity and threw the Bible into the dumpster on the way out because they were taught to read this book like a flatline text. And this book is not a flatline book. In fact, it's not even a book. It's a library of books. The word Bible literally means library. This is a library of 66 books written over thousands of years by dozens of different human authors from different historical time periods, different cultures, different social and political perspectives, and they absolutely do not all agree with one another, as they shouldn't. That would be like walking into a library and pulling different books off the shelf and saying, all these books agree with one another. So we could spend all day talking about the multiplicity of reasons why this.
Well, hang on a sec. I'm not arguing with them, but that part there is a little confusing for me, that he compared it to walking into a library and pulling books off and saying, all these books agree with each other. Like, isn't there kind of a correlation between all the books in the Bible? Like, don't they kind of legitimize each other to some degree? Isn't that why they were put together in the canon?
I think that was like the purpose around like putting the canon together.
Yeah.
With like that they held similar values and structures, and
Might
the
have been a
stories
bigger
kind of lined up, like the stories line up, and I think they would think that the people who put it together, that there's no contradictions.
Right.
Because I think that was like a big key in it. And apparently it was done by like a bunch of apostolic fathers who came together and like assembled all these books. That's so the story goes.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Here. And who knows? Maybe the Bible, if it wasn't for it being put together as the canon, would have incorporated a whole bunch of other books with all kinds of
There
stuff.
are tons of other ones. It's kind of sad when I see some of the books, like the Book of Enoch's awesome if you've ever read it. The Gospel of Thomas is awesome.
Yeah, I got a glimpse of the Gospel of Thomas, and
Yeah.
and I don't even know if that's real. I don't know if
Yeah.
the Gospel of Thomas is real, but I noted, I was like, sounds like Jesus is talking about enlightenment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he so clearly sounds like he's talking about enlightenment.
Yeah.
But one thing I'll say is that, even in the canon that we all have of the Bible, Jesus' words seem different to me than Yahweh or Jehovah's kind of character and actions in the Old Testament.
Like in the Old Testament?
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, not wildly different. Well, I guess in some parts, wildly different.
Yeah.
You know, like, he seems like a terrifying, scary, vengeful, jealous,
God in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And
And
versus kind of the more loving, forgiving.
Yeah,
no.
Jesus is like,
Character of Jesus.
If somebody slaps you, turn the other cheek. Like,
Yeah.
I haven't met a Christian, I don't think yet, that like actually follows that. They're like, well, you would not turn the other cheek if you slap me. I'm like,
Yeah.
but anyway, not trying to judge anybody.
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
Let's keep going.
This book is not inerrant or infallible. But I'm just going to give you what I believe are the three most convincing arguments for that. And the first one is simply that inerrancy is impossible. The Bible cannot be perfect for the very simple fact that there is no such thing as perfection. Perfection is a concept invented by the human mind, but it doesn't actually map onto reality. For the very simple fact that if something has any objective quality to it whatsoever, then technically it can be improved somehow. And so when Christians say that this book is perfect and inerrant, my response is always, perfect according to what standard? According to your standard? Because there's 30,000 different denominations of Christianity, most of which say that they're the only one that's right and everyone else is going to hell. And so how are we supposed to know who to believe or who to trust? How do you think the Apostle Paul would have reacted if a 21st century evangelical Christian had showed up in his prison cell while he was writing one of his letters and said, Paul, the letter you're writing is the inerrant, infallible, perfect word of God? He probably would have been like, yo, dude, chill out. I'm just writing a letter to my friends in Corinth. The claim of biblical inerrancy is really nothing more than an ego temper tantrum. It's just the way that the ego tries to control people by forcing a certain narrative onto them to get them to do what it wants or believe what it wants.
I love the idea of describing certain certain things as an ego temper
I know, I was
tantrum. I
just
want to
thinking
apply
that
that
too,
to
yeah.
everything. Like somebody that's passive aggressive, you're having a temper tantrum. They'd be like, "I'm literally calmer than you." You'd be like, "That's a temper tantrum."
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
You know, because people hate because that it really causes internally the ego to combust.
Yeah.
When you call it out for what it's really up to.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
even though it's maybe behaving calmly.
Yeah, good point.
But there's no such thing as perfection in reality. Where do we find the one perfect anything in the universe? Everything just exists on a spectrum. Some things are on this side of the spectrum, some things are on this side of the spectrum. Everything serves its rightful purpose. For example, let's say that you wanted to argue that the cheetah is the perfect apex predator. Well, it's only perfect for its environment, right? Because the ice age might come along and now it's no longer perfect for its environment. Now the polar bear is. So which one's the inerrant, infallible predator? The answer is both or neither of them, because it all depends on what environment they're in, because everything exists on a spectrum. So that's the same reason why this book cannot be perfect, because it all depends on what lens it's being read through. Because even if we found some kind of indigenous Amazonian tribe that had never been contacted by humans before, and we translated this book into their native language and gave it to them, they still wouldn't make any sense out of it, because their religions, their view of life, of reality, their paradigms, the way they think is all so vastly different than the culture this book was written in that it would be meaningless to them. They wouldn't be able to make sense out of it. And that's why the idea that any book can be perfect is simply a nonsensical idea. So when a Christian tries to tell me that this book is perfect, my response is always, I don't even know what you mean by that. I wouldn't even know how to read this book through that lens. And their response is, well, it's simple. Just read it as if every word is literally true. And so now they want me to read this ancient world book that is largely poetry and metaphor and parable as if it's literally all true. So now I have to believe in seven-headed dragons and talking snakes and talking donkeys. And why do we stop there? Let's just believe in fairy tales. A lot of Christians have this really weird idea that by me saying this book isn't inerrant, I'm somehow diminishing it. But in reality, labeling this book to be inerrant is actually diminishing it. Because some of the best parts about this book are its darkness, are its humanity, the way that it gets down in the dirt with us, eyeball to eyeball, with the human experience. And it doesn't run from it. It doesn't rationalize it away. It asks open-ended questions. It asks the tough questions. And it captures that experience beautifully. So I take this book far too seriously to read it literally. And so when you claim that this book is inerrant, then you lose all of that. You lose this beautiful unfolding narrative about mankind's evolving understanding about the divine. And you turn it into a dictionary. You turn this beautiful, raw, authentic human story about the pursuit of God into a textbook. And it's a big shocker why nobody wants to read it anymore, because you sucked the life right out of it. We can't read this book for what it really is anymore. We have to read it like the Constitution. And so the church is finding out the hard way now that by labeling this book perfect and inerrant and lording it over people for 2,000 years has actually killed it. And it's not the book that's the problem, it's the framework that's the problem. The second reason that the Bible...
Before we just get into the second reason there, I think he made a good point with the indigenous tribes and stuff like that. And it makes me just think sometimes of the mental gymnastics that people do sometimes over their scriptures. And like, I know exactly what they would say. They would say, well, God will only judge them according to like what they actually know. I'm like, come on. Well, then that goes for everyone.
I know Christian mystics. I know there's like another layer to this where actually you can read it as literally true and live in a mystical land. But, and I'm not saying that like judgily.
Yeah.
I'm saying like, no, there's like a version of life that's a different perspective than that. You gotta understand who Aaron Abke is talking to here.
Yeah.
And the rationality to which he's approaching this whole thing.
Yeah.
There's deeper levels to life that you might not want to bother with yet because you're like, trying to get your bills paid.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be swept away in fantasy world. But there is a deeper way to look at things too. Like you could return to the Bible and be like, holy crap, it's literally literal. And it wouldn't necessarily be crazy.
Yeah.
But you gotta be honest about
Because
where you're at.
you're saying that it can meet the Bible, or not just the Bible, like any ancient scriptures from any group, that they can maybe hit people at different levels of where they are in maybe their ability to accept certain things, accept truth, or understand reality. It's like hitting on different levels where people are at.
Yes, and if you can't be flexible in this life, that's not like you got to be so flexible that sometimes you're not flexible. You know, there's a time to take things literally, and then there's a time to shake that off and get real loosey-goosey, and there's a time to get real scientific. This thing is dynamic, in case you haven't noticed. And so, to those that have got ears here, listen. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just saying, I know Christian mystics, and it doesn't not necessarily work for them. Like, they believe wholeheartely, you know?
Yeah.
And they're some great people.
Yeah.
So... But then again, if you're looking around and you're like, what are you smoking? You know what I mean? Like, what the hell? 10-headed dragons and crap? Like, what is that about? You know, we got science to prove things.
But even people like that who look at stuff like that, coming at the Bible from a perspective of what he's talking about, you might actually be able to gain some insight and some knowledge outside of those things, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, it can meet people from all different walks of life.
It's the living word, as it's known.
Bible is not inerrant is the simple fact that human language is highly subjective. So inerrant according to what? Inerrant according to who? Whose definition of inerrant should we believe? Because again, 30,000 denominations of Christianity would attest to the fact that it's not that simple. Human language is incredibly complex and multidimensional. Most words have more than one definition, and there's many ways of interpreting a single sentence. If this book was inerrant, then we would need a transcript to go along with it telling us which interpretation and which definition to use for every word and sentence we read. And so you're asking me to overlook all of that. And the usual response I get to this is, well, I'm not asking you to overlook all the human aspects of the Bible. I'm just saying that God used the humans to write through them.
I just wanted to add this in here kind of as a dovetail to that little rant I went on.
Yeah.
You know, let's get out of the realm of Christianity. There's a story about an old monk, like Buddhist monk, that was not religious at all, and was or was trying to figure things out. Not really important. He was walking past a hut with a mother trying to wake up her kids, and she was going, "It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up." And as the story goes, he like got enlightened just from hearing that, passing by it, like awoken him. It's possible that you could be reading friggin' Peter Pan. It's possible that you could be doing anything and get something from it, you know? A big shift, I think I've talked about it on the show before, a big shift in my life happened when I was watching that show Last Man on Earth. I had like an awakening. I was like, I'm living life wrong. So of course, you know, God can speak to you through all things. I mean, it's in the Bible that God spoke through a donkey at one point.
Yeah.
You know, so this thing is powerful, and, you know, I just wanted to throw that. Hopefully that adds to the point we were making earlier about maybe there's a time to look at it as like a living, breathing word of God, and then a time to, you know, dissect it scientifically.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And so it reflects some human stuff too. Not so fast. You don't get to have your cake and eat it too. You can't say that the Bible was dictated by God and has human influence. Because if there's any trace of human influence in the Bible, then you lose inerrancy. Because last time I checked, God didn't leave us any footnotes at the bottom telling us, oh yeah, that stuff was me, and then that stuff up there, that was them. I didn't do that stuff. And so now it's up to you and I to figure out which part is the human influence and which part is the divine influence. And that just turns into this never-ending, exhausting argument. But what usually happens when you try to have this conversation with someone is that they just keep playing dodgeball to all your logical arguments. Duck, dive, dip, duck, and dodge. So if you believe that this book is infallible and perfect, then the weight is not on me to disprove that. The weight is on you to prove that it is perfect and inerrant. because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But the only evidence you ever get from anyone is, well, the Bible claims that it is. And that's not true, but even if it was true, that still wouldn't mean anything. That's just circular reasoning. I can write down on a sticky note, this sticky note is perfect and infallible. Does that make it true? Well, the sticky note says it. That's just not good enough. You have to provide something more substantial than that, because the belief that the Bible is infallible and perfect has been used to cause untold amounts of deaths and suffering for humans for the last 2,000 years. And so I'm going to require a little bit more from you if you're going to support that belief system. And the third reason that the Bible is not inerrant is the simple fact that it is a violation of our free will. Because I think we would all agree that a human is not capable of writing an inerrant, infallible book. So if someone's going to write a perfect book, it's going to have to be God, right? But God doesn't have any hands or fingers to write with, so he's got to use a human. And so God has to force a human to write an inerrant book that they could never have written of their own free will. And so I find it very interesting that the first argument that fundamentalists resort to when you question them on, hey, why does God have to torture people forever? And their response is, well, he doesn't want to torture them, brother, of course. But unfortunately, he cannot violate our free will. So, he has to punish us for our wrongdoing. But then the same people will turn right around and claim that this book is perfect because the humans who wrote it had been raped of their free will by the Holy Spirit so that God could give us his perfect word uncontaminated. And so again, which one is it? Does God not violate our free will to the point of torturing us because of it? Or does he violate it when it suits him? Come on, God, that's totally unfair. Why don't you take my free will away so I don't have to go to hell? Well, I do apologize, my child, but don't worry. It's only this one time. So we end up with this ridiculous idea that God stole some people's free will so he could write a book to warn the rest of the people that he can't steal their free will and they're going to hell. Sounds like the good news to me. Where do I sign up? Religious fundamentalists are remarkably inconsistent in their theology. Every time you point out a contradiction or something that doesn't make sense in their belief system, they just change the rules really quick. It's kind of like two kids playing tag at recess, and every time one of them gets tagged, he changes the rules so he doesn't get caught. So in summary, the Bible is not a flatline text that was dictated to us by God. It's a conversation with God. It's a journey with God over thousands and thousands of years across many different cultures and many different authors, all trying to find out the same thing. What is God really like? And it all culminates in the final revelation of God, which is Jesus. The revelation of God did not come through a book. It came through a person. And for the last 2,000 years, the church has idolized this book and turned it into the very golden calf that this book warns about, and all the while ignoring the very thing that this book is pointing to. So if somebody points you to the moon, don't worship their finger. Look in the direction they're pointing to. And this book is incredible and inspiring and beautiful, not because it's perfect, but because it points beyond itself to that which is perfect. This book is pointing us to that which can never be described in words, to the eternal mystery and reality of the great I am.
Some good words.
I know some pretty open-minded, at least one anyway. Somebody's pretty open-minded Christian. I feel like they would understand what he said by that. When somebody's pointing to the moon, you don't look at the finger pointing. You look at where they're looking, and they would know what that means because they've done a lot of introspection and they take things seriously. Tell you one thing that's a huge thing for understanding is valuing truth. A lot of people don't. I don't think some people have the capacity to value truth. They're like, it's got nothing to do with truth. It's just truth. So shush. You know what I mean? But there's a difference between like militantly just defending truth and actually caring about what's true for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like looking at different perspectives, different ways of looking at things. One thing that he didn't even really mention in here is that, there are other ways. He didn't even specifically say how to look at it, more like just look at what it's pointing to. Mm-hmm. But also in any ancient scriptures, you could take the Bible just But like when you're reading it, read it as if it's speaking to you directly.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not do that? Read it every kind of way.
Yeah.
Read it like a scientist. Read it like
Yeah.
it's a magical book.
Yeah.
Read it whatever way you want,
Yeah.
and then see what works.
Yeah.
I got all kinds of, when you actually when you get off your damn phone and you do some experiments, you learn all kinds of cool techniques in life.
When I started studying like mysticism and looking at like Eastern traditions and stuff like that and belief systems, I started seeing the scriptures differently. I started seeing Jesus differently.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's one thing. I remember I used to say that I was like, I only had a deeper relationship with Jesus or God after I was ready to stomp the Bible and toss it out the window. Then I could look at it without a like a Christian ego. Like a Christian ego.
Yeah.
Like, you came from heaven to earth to show the way. Like when you like get rid of that and you can look at the Bible a little more objectively, you can appreciate it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's some gold in here. And then, and then on and on
so,
and on.
Yeah, and now knowing some of the things that that I was completely ignorant of before, it's like I can't believe I didn't see that.
But here's the thing, okay? I come off awfully judgy. It's hard to talk about anything because whenever you're doing anything in this reality, you're like carving out a slice of it that doesn't encompass the whole thing.
Yeah.
So forgive me for being insulting. We grew up in the church, and so I'm just kidding around. But I don't even judge somebody that's fundamentalist, because what's the motto around Stay Spiritual Studios?
Yeah.
If it's happening, it's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
If that's what's occurring in reality, then guess what? It's God ordained.
Yeah.
Because he could come down, or she could come down, or it could come down at any time and say, stop the presses.
Yeah. This is just our thing, what we've learned and what we've seen and our experience. Yeah. So, let us know what you guys think about what he said in the comments. And, don't forget to hit the notification bell on any of the other stuff that we do, so you know that when our new videos come out and stuff like that. But if you did like this video, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share with a friend, and everybody, until next time,
Stay spiritual.